Today, we are going to take a really quick tour of a lot of different groups of organisms that occur in and around buildings that may bite us or sting us. So throughout the presentation today, I'll be sharing some links that should bring you to more information should you have additional questions. And before I get into all these really negative issues around insects, I wanted to start by first talking about the extremely positive and beneficial role that insects play in our world and our environment. I think too often there's a general fear of insects and anything that's crawling outdoors, especially indoors, people just want to get rid of. But insects play a critical role. In a paper that was published in 2006, they estimated the amount of ecological services that wild insects contribute to our economy. And that figure in 2006 was $57 billion. The reference is here for Losi and Vaughn, and they also mentioned that insects put food on our tables and remove our waste. So you see here two pictures by colleagues in my program, Joellen Lampman and Ken Wise, one of a pollinator, certainly not an agricultural plant here, but a great photo of a honeybee pollinating a plant, whereas dung beetles will process cow pats and remove those from a field, which would cost X number of dollars to do if we had to do it manually. So insects are contributing a huge amount to our economy. They provide biological and pest control naturally. There's lots of different things that some we'll talk about today that will kill all different kinds of crawling other critters that will reduce their populations and make them less of a pest problem for us. Insects may serve as bioindicators, telling us if a water source is high enough quality to drink. They are the base of very complex food webs, and in many situations, they serve as the food that is providing nourishment to the rest of the entire group, including all other animals in that entire ecosystem. So they are the base. They're converting food from the sun, plant material, they're consuming that, and then they become food. And they just have intrinsic value. So maybe we don't need to place any economic value on them. They are in and of themselves interesting to look at. They are their own species that have evolved over millions of years, and they're worth keeping around. So we know that insect populations are in decline, and anything that you can do at home to help promote some of these beneficial organisms by planting native plants or creating other habitat, we strongly encourage. That being said, some insects suck and others sting. And so we'd really like to avoid interactions with these two different groups of organisms because of the impacts that they can have. So insects that suck include blood feeders. They derive their nutrition from blood. Many of them have associated organisms in their gut that help them process the blood and turn it into something that's useful for them. And some of the ones that we'll talk about today are bed bugs, mosquitoes. We'll do a quick look at fleas and ticks as well. And then other insects sting. They're not doing this for any food reason. They're doing this to defend themselves, their colony, or potentially their offspring. And the ones that we will talk about today that either bite or sting include spiders, bees, and wasps. So what are the outcomes of some of these interactions? Well, if we're talking about blood feeders, the biggest risk that we see is the potential to transfer pathogens to people and pets. So this graphic from the California Department of Public Health shows the transmission cycle for Lyme disease to people. Ticks are in the environment. They're feeding on a variety of hosts that may contain a pathogen. The tick then acquires that pathogen and can transfer it to people. So certainly this is an outcome that we would prefer to avoid. Another outcome from the stinging and biting insects is allergic reactions, potentially escalated to anaphylaxis, and in the worst case scenario, cardiac arrest from exposure to the venom that's present in those stings or bites. The spiders that people are most afraid of, and we'll take a closer look later, are unlikely to be in the Northeast, but our concerns are that they have either a necrotizing bite, which creates a flesh wound, or a neurological bite that can have impacts on our nervous system. So whether it's a blood-feeding organism or one that bites or stings in defense, there could be negative outcomes for us. And for context with these pictures, this is me and Cooper, who were both stung by the same group of bumblebees that were near our garden. So certainly not a really negative outcome for us, but certainly there could be worse outcomes if people are allergic to those stings. So our goals today are to recognize some common biting and stinging arthropods that could be around your home, to understand the situations that might be risky for you and where you might want to take some action. We're going to bust some myths. There's a lot of things out there that you might hear that are just false. And hopefully we can cover some management options that are things you can do to minimize these negative interactions. So I want to first talk about the blood feeders, and I don't want you to feel bad for them, but I want you to think about their biology and their behavior. They are looking for food from hosts that may not be that easy to find. They have to use their senses of detecting carbon dioxide, maybe detecting heat, or pheromones, which are pheromones produced by another organism. So they're always looking to try and locate their host. They need adaptations to pierce the skin and then suck the blood. And it's thought that evolutionarily, maybe this came from plant-feeding organisms, since some of the same groups of critters that feed on plants are also blood feeders. And then they have to be able to digest that blood. It's not as easy for insects to digest blood as it is to digest the plant materials that they typically feed on. So they need mutualistic bacteria and other associations to be able to digest and obtain the essential nutrients from that blood. And importantly, they have to be able to feed without detection. Otherwise, this happens, right? With a mosquito or a black fly, they're not really great at preventing your detection of them. And so you may smack them and kill them, which makes them an ineffective biting organism. But others use chemicals in their saliva to prevent detection, and you may have an allergic reaction later, but not be able to detect them right away. So some of the traits of blood feeders, they will have piercing mouth parts. On the left, we have a mosquito, when you can see that mouth part piercing what would be skin and feeding on blood. They may be light-footed so that they are able to walk on skin and not be easily detected. Some of them are wingless, and that's an adaptation to living either very close to the host and hiding in cracks and crevices, or living on the host themselves. And for those organisms that do live on the host, like this one here on the right is a head louse, they will have grasping claws so that they can hold on and not be pulled off with typical grooming. Oops, wrong way. There's also some body shape adaptations. So bed bugs, you can see here on the left, are dorso-ventrally flattened, which means from the top and bottom they are flattened. This allows them to fit in those tight cracks and crevices near resting areas of their host. But fleas, on the other hand, spend more of their time on the host, and so they are flattened laterally so that they can move between the hairs of a dog or cat. There are differences in how long some of these blood feeders remain on the host. Some of them, like mosquitoes, bedbugs, and ticks, are only there temporarily. They go, they feed, and they drop off once they're done feeding, or they fly away. Others are semi-permanent. When we think about fleas, lice, and mites, they spend most of their time on the host itself, and so they have to have different adaptations to be cryptic, not be removed, and to not be detected. And there's differences in terms of which life stage and how many life stages are actually feeding on blood. So we consider mosquitoes and fleas, both, big pest problems, potential of transmitting pathogens. It's only the adult stage that feeds on people. The larval stage for mosquitoes is an aquatic organism that develops in water. And fleas are an environmental pest where they develop in moist habitats. So the larval stage may not be feeding. In the case of bed bugs, lice, mites, and ticks, well, then all life stages are feeding on blood. So there's different approaches to managing pests that are always feeding on the host versus some that have different life stages off of the host. So throughout our presentation today, I'm going to ask you some true or false questions, and hopefully you're able to use the chat, or you can just answer in your own head as I ask these questions. So feel free to plug in your answer now, but true or false, bed bug bites leave specific marks that can be identified by a doctor. And I'll take a look here at the chat. I'll give you about 30 seconds to see if anybody types in. And Hillary, I'm not sure if you can see any responses. I haven't seen any.
I don't see any.
Okay, so maybe people are just, oh, I see a response in the Q&A. Okay.
Oh, it says the chat is closed. Let me figure out why.
Okay. So we'll get that up. As we get that up, you'll have plenty of opportunities to do other ones. So for now, I'll just tell you that this is false. And some people responded that this is false. Every person responds differently to arthropod bites or stings. And so it's not easy to determine what caused the potential reaction you're seeing in a person. It's not easy to see if there's a single mark from an animal that has, just a proboscis versus spiders that have two chelicerae. So it's not possible for anyone to determine what caused that reaction unless they saw the critter that actually did it. So I'm happy to see some false answers. For our next, this is a multiple choice, I suppose. We're going to talk about bed bugs first. So I'd like you to look at these 8 images here and tell me which one is a bed bug. And again, I'll give us about 30 seconds.
The chat should be working. Yay, we got some responses. Sorry about that.
There's always something. Okay, so some people are on to me. They know that this is a trick question. I love trying to trick people. So Mark and others, you are correct that there are no bed bugs in this picture. And the reason I like to show this, this is a big screen. You could see these things very clearly. Some of these things may easily be found in your bed, but it's really easy to misidentify or insects in general, arthropods as well. So the thing that I'll say first is that accurate identification is going to be essential to dealing with any of the pest problems we'll talk about today. And there's a number of resources that are available to you in your own state, whether it's New York or other states. There's the Cooperative Extension System. Our host today is Cornell Cooperative of Westchester, and they provide identification services for any pests that you bring in. And the same would probably be true in any county association in different states. There's going to be a cost per sample. It varies by site. You can send it to your land-grant university. In our case, that's going to be Cornell. It will be $25 per sample, and they'll provide you with a report telling you what it is and some information that might help you manage or better understand that pest. And then if you're just taking pictures, there's also ways that you can submit them online or by email, including Identify Us. So really important that we accurately identify the critters that we're dealing with so that we can have the best information for management. So here's our bed bugs. The adult is 5 millimeters long, 3 millimeters wide, flat and brown. The nymphs vary in size. You saw earlier a life cycle of the bed bugs, so you know they start out really tiny and then they get larger as they feed and develop. But the important thing to keep in mind here is that all life stages of bed bugs are visible. You can see this first instar nymph that hasn't even fed yet next to a poppy seed. If you could see a poppy seed with your eyes, you could see a bed bug nymph. So all life stages are visible. Sometimes we are better able to identify them with the evidence that they leave behind. So in the process of their development, they will leave these cast skins. They need to shed their skin in order to grow. So that may be found in their environment. But they also poop by where they rest, kind of a disgusting feature of their biology, but it also is really useful for identifying where bed bugs are present and when they are present. One way that we might be able to determine if that's just a flaw in the fabric or if it's actually bed bug feces is to wet that with a cotton swab. And if it turns into this rusty color, it's most likely that that was processed blood that was excreted by a bed bug. So sometimes we use different types of evidence for identification. So another true false question for you. Bed bugs only come from used items. And there's a comment that can use Google Lens for identification. That is definitely helpful. There's lots of tools out there that we can use to identify insects. Sometimes, you know, we just have a piece, and that's when our experts are really essential. Seeing lots of falses here, so that's good news. So bed bugs absolutely come from used furniture, used items, things that we pick up, whether it's on the side of the road, like this furniture, both of which had bed bugs. But also bed bugs can be transferred in any public space. So this can include hotels. If you stay in a hotel, you put your items down, bed bugs can get onto your personal items and you bring them home. Theaters, transportation, whether it's an airliner, a boat, any type of transportation, bed bugs can be in that environment where people are resting or living and can be transferred to your personal items. And possibly the scariest one is offices and work. So if someone in the work environment is dealing with bed bugs at home and isn't taking the proper precautions to prevent themselves from bringing those bed bugs to work, they can easily be transferred in that environment to your personal belongings. Bed bugs can also move within a building. So in multifamily situations, we may see bed bugs moving between connections in the floor or to adjacent rooms. And they can spread in common areas like laundry rooms as well. So the number one rule of dealing with bed bugs is to not panic, right? Many times people think they have been bitten by a bed bug, they found evidence of a bed bug, and their immediate reaction is to just get rid of everything. And that is not the best thing to do, because that will actually disperse bed bugs to new places where they weren't previously, and it can really complicate management. So especially in those new introductions, we want to take a deep breath, think about the problem where it's centered, and take a very targeted approach. We maybe want to inspect, identify where the pest is located, and then do some of these targeted treatments that we'll talk about in just a second. One of the things that we can do either proactively or as part of a management program is the use of these interceptor devices. There's a number of different types that are available on the market, and they all work in the same way as a bed bug can crawl up the rough surface on the outer portion of that device, and then it gets stuck in a well. Whether that well has been treated with talcum powder to make it a very slippery surface, or it's designed in a way that maintains a very slippery surface on the inside, the bed bugs get trapped, they can't get back out, and they actually dry out and die. So it's a very economical type of trap to detect movement of bed bugs. These can be put under the legs of bed or other furnitures, or they can just be stowed near areas where people are resting. And then they can be vacuumed out to remove those dead bed bugs. So some areas that we might think about using these are going to be under bed legs or near a couch and other resting areas. Um, as I mentioned, they're a great option for detection, but they can also be used to eliminate early introductions. So if you're someone that is in and out of different homes and facilities as part of your work, or you travel a lot, having several of these in your bedroom or other locations where you place your belongings after you travel can be a great way to intercept bed bugs, never allowing them to get to the bed and start to reproduce. Another thing that is preventative and that people might do in response to an infestation is the use of mattress and box spring encasements. And what these do is they cover the entire mattress so you don't have to throw it out. They will entomb any bugs that are inside. They're a white color with no seams, so any activity from bed bugs, including those fecal stains, will be easily detected. It's important that you make sure that there's no tears, that they don't rub up against a metal bed frame, because those openings will then create new harborage for the bed bugs. And this is a great approach because just throwing out the bed isn't going to solve the problem. You still have the frame itself, you still maybe have a headboard, maybe bed bugs are in the surrounding area. So again, discarding things right off the bat is not going to be the best solution. When we think about bedbug infestations, where they often start is where people are resting and where their head is located. So they'll often be associated with the headboard itself, near mattress seams at the head end of the bed, and perhaps at the floor molding in those locations as well. So one of the things that we can do is some targeted vacuuming. We could use a knee-high stocking, which is a really novel approach to preventing your vacuum from being infested. You put that knee-high stocking into the wand of the vacuum and then put an applicator on, often the crack and crevice tool that you see here. Any bugs that get sucked up into there will remain in that knee-high stocking, which you can then tie off and throw outdoors. You haven't infested your vacuum cleaner and you are effectively getting rid of those bed bugs. So that targeted vacuuming is going to be a much better approach than discarding everything in your home. For additional information, there's a really great fact sheet by Rutgers University, Dr. Changlu Wang, cost-effective and money-wasting bedbug control methods. I like this because it's really breaks down what you should do and what is not going to be effective and what would just waste money. In addition, we have a resource of how to get bed bugs out of your belongings, and I will put our bed bug resources in the chat now. This will direct you to our What's Bugging You page, and there are links to all kinds of resources on that page. So we're going to transition now to our next group of biting arthropods, the fleas. They are, and this is just my playing around with the name, flightless, they don't have wings, leaping, we know they jump, ectoparasites because they feed on the outside of our body, arthropods. Problems with fleas often start indoors with pets, but they may also come from wildlife. So we have here a literal textbook example of a cat that has fleas. The fleas are living on the cat as an adult. They will lay their eggs on that animal. The eggs fall off into the bedding, and that's where the larvae hatch and develop. So some of the evidence that we may see when there's a flea infestation is this flea dirt, this black stringy material. That is the processed blood of the flea. It is actually the larval food source for fleas. And then we may see these white specks, which are the eggs of that the adults have deposited on the animal. So some of this evidence that we may see in addition to that is going to be critters in the fur. You may see a brown little arthropod moving through the fur, definite evidence that there's a problem. And also if your pet hasn't before been scratching, but all of a sudden starts scratching and biting their rear end, that's a good indication that they're being bitten by fleas. So as we said, fleas will mate on the host, they'll lay eggs, and then eggs drop off into resting areas. This example shows how flea eggs could really be dispersed very far by shaking of that animal. Fleas really require a very humid environment to develop, so not all locations are going to be ideal for their development. If we're thinking about outdoors, it's going to be shady areas that remain cool and damp, like under a porch or under vegetation. Indoors, it's often associated with the pet bedding because because the animal laying in that environment will keep it moist from their own body. Larvae will live in the carpet, the pile of the carpet, or in the bedding of the host itself. Once the larvae complete their development, we get to the next stage of their life cycle that is very challenging for management. As larvae pupate, they put this silken cocoon around the outside of their body. This will attract dust and other particles from the environment and is very protective against drying out and also pesticide applications. This stage can stay dormant for up to 6 months. So maybe you've had this experience where you are returning to a site for the first time, like a summer cabin or a vacation rental, and you show up and you walk in and all of a sudden there's hundreds of fleas everywhere jumping on your legs and biting you. That's because this stage will stay dormant until host cues are sensed. So carbon dioxide, heat, and even the vibration from you walking in that environment when you haven't been before will all stimulate the adult fleas to emerge and look for a food source. So there are techniques to try and manage this stage, but it often does require a professional. Flea management in general is a two-step process. The first is going to be to treat the host so that they are not allowing the flea to continue to feed and reproduce. This is especially important for our companion animals such as cats and dogs. And we recently had an IPM Minute presentation by Dr. Ali Cohen, and she talked about the different flea and tick treatments and prevention for cats and dogs. I will put some links in the chat about flea and tick prevention that will be really informative and come from her department, her program. And I will share a link later on about our What's Bugging You program so that you can access those videos. Other types of treatments that may be required are removal of wildlife. So if you don't have companion animals, but all of a sudden you have fleas, that is likely the result of squirrels being in the home or raccoons or another type of animal that brought ectoparasites into that environment. Once those hosts have been either treated or removed, then it's time to clean up the environment with sanitation to remove the flea dirt, get rid of the larval food, and then some sort of treatment to kill the larvae and kill the resistant cocoon stage or the pupal stage. Okay. So we're going to move on. We're going to talk next about spiders. And I wanted to share these two contrasting images to sort of set the stage for our discussion on spiders. Certainly the perception that many people have is that they are terribly afraid of spiders. Even myself as an entomologist, I'll pick up anything with 6 legs, no problem whatsoever. You add those extra 2 legs and I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. I don't need to pick that up. It's hardwired into us to have some fear of some of these organisms based on our evolutionary experience with different organisms. But the reality of spiders in our environment in the Northeast is that many of them are cryptic. They don't want to be detected. They're not out to get you. They're not trying to bite you or attack you. So that's why, I use this cute picture of this jumping spider hidden in a leaf because they are cryptic. So some spiders come indoors simply because outside is just not a great environment for them at the present moment. Maybe it's too hot, maybe it's too wet, maybe it's too dry. Others are coming in because the environment we have indoors either creates a food source for them, like there's other food, other bugs in the home that the spiders will eat, or because our environments mimic an attractive condition for them. So our basements, if they're damp and moist, maybe that's like a cave and the spiders want to be in the cave. Um, some spiders will just wander into other locations looking for females. So that's going to be the male, and you can tell the male because they have these extended pedipalps in the front. They're said to look like boxing gloves. I think you have to use your imagination for that. But sometimes you'll see just a random spider walking around in the home in a location that doesn't really make sense, and that's because it's a male, perhaps looking for a female. I use the pictures of the yellow sac spider here to see if, one, you recognize this spider, because this is probably the most common indoor spider. And if you don't recognize it or you haven't seen it, it's because this spider does a good job of remaining cryptic. They create these little silken retreats where they'll be at the wall and ceiling juncture, and they'll forage out from there, look for something to eat, and then come back. So you probably haven't seen them, but they're probably in your home. And they're unlikely to interact with you unless you put your hand in the wrong place at the wrong time. The spiders that people fear are rarely going to be in New York. And of course, I cater this to New York because we're broadcasting today from Westchester County, New York. People are afraid of the black widow spider and its neurological effects that can have if it bites you. We can identify the female by the red markings on the abdomen. And if we see the egg case, it will be a smooth structure. The other one that people are really afraid of is the brown recluse spider. It is identified by this fiddle shape on the head, uniform color of the legs. Now, I know that many of you are not going to get this close and personal with spiders, but the easiest way to determine if the thing that you caught in your basement is actually a brown recluse and not just one of the many, many, many other spiders that look very similar to it is to look at the groupings of the eyes. If there are 3 pair of eyes, then you've got a brown recluse. Otherwise, it's one of the many other spiders. And there are a huge variety that look similar, can have similar markings of a fiddle shape on the cephalothorax. So maybe get close and personal, check it out, see if it's the brown recluse. It probably isn't. This is a extremely cryptic species that lives in the South. It doesn't do well in cold environments. It's not, the urban legend is that it's going to be shipped up here on furniture. The cases of that have been extremely rare, and I've never seen a brown recluse in my 12 years in working in pest management, with the exception of ones that were in a museum or in a zoo. So extremely rare to be found in the Northeast. Some general spider avoidance techniques. So, if you're going to be placing your hands in locations where spiders may be setting up their web, maybe they are looking for food, wear gloves, right? The spiders aren't going to be able to pierce any type of glove that you're wearing. So if you're stacking wood, if you have a stack of pots that you are going to be reusing, but they've just been sitting out, and even your tools that are sitting in the garage or the shed that haven't been touched, maybe spiders have built their nest in there. So just wear gloves. The other thing is that if you are storing boots and shoes in locations that remain damp and moist, that could be spider habitat. So this is a picture from a basement, and even in this boot, you could see a little cellar spider there. Just, be cautious of the environment and clean out your belongings before you go sticking your feet or hands in them. We can keep spiders out of environments by making the exterior of our buildings less attractive. So one thing that we can do is create a vegetation-free zone on the perimeter. This reduces the moisture that is right up against the building. Less moisture means fewer pests or fewer arthropods that are going to be living in there. There's not going to be all those little soil dwelling organisms that are spider food. So that will dry it out and make it less conducive to spiders. We can change the lighting so that there isn't light right by entryways into a building. This entire area would be very attractive to spiders because it attracts the insects. So if we discourage the insects from coming to that environment, spiders are less likely to be there as well. And then any attempts that we can make to seal off openings around the ground level is important. There's often a gap at the top of where the foundation meets the wood part of the structure. And so we can use sealant materials to close those openings. We can make sure that we don't have tears in our screens and that the seal around our windows and doors is tight to prevent arthropods from getting in. Okay, the Jorō spider is coming. Possibly. So this is a spider that was first detected in Georgia, I believe, a few years ago. It has expanded its range in the time that it was first introduced. And what's the risk for us? Not a whole lot. Maybe we'll see some of these big spiders outdoors. Are they going to come into your home and steal your children? No. They're an outdoor spider. They're doing the same thing as some of our other big yellow outdoor spiders. And it's not really something that we really need to worry about unless something new comes out about this particular organism. But from a perspective of someone that appreciates arthropods in general, this is just a big, cool looking spider that's going to create its webs and catch a lot of bugs in that environment. So we're going to move on to some of the stinging organisms now. We'll talk about bees and wasps and talk about the different risks that are associated with these groups. I'm breaking this down a little bit because we, as in the general public, lump everything into bees and wasps. We don't see any differences in the different types of organisms that are out there and what their natural history is. But from an entomological perspective, there's really two different groups of organisms that are making their homes in and around our buildings. And that includes the solitary bees and wasps that create their own nest. So one female to one nest. In this case, a carpenter bee female making her own nest in this piece of wood. She'll lay her eggs in there. Mud dauber wasps, each tube here is one female. So it's not a hive with multiple individuals. It's a single organism making their own nest. The other group is going to be the social bees and wasps. And these will have a nest that includes many individuals. There's often one or a couple queens that are laying eggs, and then a lot of workers that are doing different functions associated with that nest. So when it comes to the risk of being stung, there's a relatively low risk if we're talking about solitary bees and wasps. However, that risk increases when we're talking about social bees and wasps that have many organisms in the nest, because they are looking to defend the entire group versus just having their own nest that they can create a new nest. So, how many times can a wasp sting? And you can put this in the chat, and I'll take a quick look here to see if there's any questions. There's a question, have there been more black widows at the Jersey Shore? And are they more attracted to stone yards? And the thing I'll say about insects and arthropods in general is that the range of a lot of these organisms are changing. As our climate continues to change and warm, the distribution of more southern species is moving north. There could be black widows. There's certainly Mediterranean brown widows in New Jersey and New York. There could be black widows making their way up here. But again, they're going to be a relatively cryptic species that's not going to be, we're not going to engage with very much. So good. Many people got this right. How many times can a wasp sting? A wasp can sting multiple times. Bees, only the honeybee stings just once. So there's a lot of misinformation out there that all bees sting only once. Wasps can sting multiple times. And the mechanism for the honeybee and why it only stings once is that once it implants that stinger into you, the stinger actually gets pulled out of the insect's body. And it continues to pump venom into you even after it's been removed. So if you do get stung by a honeybee, you want to make sure that you remove the stinger. Otherwise, it will continue to inject that venom that can affect you. So in all bees and wasps, the stinger is a modified egg-laying structure. So only the female organisms in that group are the ones that are stinging. And so we'll take a look at some of the common social bees and wasps that are defending a nest. The first one are the paper wasps. These guys have an open comb nest. As you can see here, they're often creating their nests under overhangs and other protected areas from rain. You'll be able to see the insect themselves. You'll see the pupa inside the individual cells, or the larva, and then the pupal cases here. In our area of the Northeast, there's the golden paper wasp, as well as the European paper wasp, which is an introduced species. That one is a little bit more aggressive, and their colonies may be, or their nests may be a little bit larger with more individuals. So if you've gotten too close to one of them, you may see them all kind of look at you and think about going after you to defend that nest. Our bumblebees are social bees. They will have multiple individuals living in their nest, and this can be made in a stone wall, in a rodent burrow, other types of protected locations, often at ground level. They'll have these honey pot or nectar pots inside their nests to nourish themselves, and they'll have these brood clusters where their offspring are developing. And then we have the bald-faced hornets and the yellow jackets, which are both types of wasps, yellow jackets. They will have this enclosed nest, so you can't actually see all of the details of what's going on inside like you can with the paper wasps. Yellow jackets will have aerial nests, ground nests, and they can even create nests in voids, whereas the bald-faced hornet is going to just create these types of nests in trees. So, true or false? Wasp decoys can deter nesting. Good, good, good. Couple falses coming in here. This is extremely unlikely, although there hasn't been any formal study that I'm aware of that has evaluated them. This is just the brown paper bag trick, but I've seen decoys that are pretty expensive that you can buy to put out. And the reason that we suspect this is not going to be effective is that there's no mechanism in these organisms to alert them to others and avoid that. This is a picture from where our office is based in Geneva, New York, and you can see 1, 2, 3 nests in these trees that are all close in proximity. No deterrence from creating those nests. Another true false. Bees and wasps reuse their nests. All right. Another false. So, especially in the Northeast, nests are annual. Some insects may overwinter in that nest and then emerge the following spring. But in many cases, in the fall and throughout the winter, anything that's in there will die. But each year, the new queens will build their own nest. So these nests are not reused. So keeping track of which one was there the previous year can make it a lot easier to remove them if you don't have to worry about wearing the personal protective equipment. In some species, the more southern species, they may have more perennial colonies and may reuse that same site year after year. I guess the one caveat here, my little star here, is for our managed bees. So honeybees will use the same nest site over and over again. They are managed in their colonies, so they certainly return to that colony year after year. So something that we may start seeing soon in the spring, once our snow clears, is that the yellow jackets will emerge and the other wasps will emerge, and they'll start to scrape wood to create their nest out of the pulp that they collect. So we can see here a paper wasp. She's scraping that wood, pulling off the sort of loose and damp fibrous materials. She'll bring that back and using her salivary secretions, make the paper wasp nest that we are familiar with. And you may look at your deck in a new light now by seeing all these different vertical striations as been the result of wasp foraging. So that group were all the social organisms that are likely to defend a nest if you encounter them. This group is the solitary bees and wasps that are unlikely to defend themselves unless you really irritate them. So if you picked up a female and you shook her in your hands, yeah, she's probably going to sting you. But if you're just walking around in their environment, they are unlikely to sting you. So this is the ground bees, which are a springtime insect. If you're familiar with them, you may have these piles of soil in your backyard, and there may be dozens of bees flying around. Our cicada killers and our mud daubers. So here's just a quick video of some ground bees that I took. You can tell from the perspective that I was actually laying down in this environment. I've walked through this area barefoot and have never been stung by these bees. In this situation, the bees that are all flying around are the male bees, and they are looking for females poking their heads out of those burrows to mate. So because they're males, they're unable to sting, and the females are not looking to sting or defend themselves because they don't have a nest to defend, a colony to defend. Another one that you may be familiar with and are potentially afraid of are carpenter bees. So you could see here some carpenter bees hovering. They'll come at you, they'll be in your face, they'll try to intimidate you. But those are the male carpenter bees. And again, as males, they don't have a stinger. So this intimidation is to deter other organisms from getting near where the females are nesting. But really, they don't represent any risk. So we'll do a quick who's who of the black and yellow bees. If they have this nice fuzzy or hairy hiney back here, that's going to be your bumblebees. In contrast, if it's a shiny hiney back here where there's devoid of hair, that is going to be a carpenter bee. And if we take a close look at the faces of our carpenter bees, the one that's getting in your face is the male. And he's got this yellow clypeus, this yellow part of his face, easily distinguished from the male that has the all black face. So the male, again, no stinger, just trying to harass you and keep you away from the females, not really representing any risk to you. So given both the solitary and the social bees and wasps, what should you do? If you have identified them as a solitary organism and you can leave them alone, just leave them alone. They're not going to come after you. They're not going to be aggressive towards you to try and keep you away from their nest. If they are social insects, you can also leave them alone if their nest site is far away from human activity. So if they're nesting in a tree far away from your home, that's fine. They're unlikely to engage with you. But if they are building a nest that's near a walkway or in bushes along a walkway where people are constantly moving, that may be the situation where you want to manage them. And it's best to start early. So we recommend, especially if it's your home that we're talking about, doing a survey every 2 weeks starting in June to look for these initial or starting nests. They're very easy to knock down at that time with a stream of water or even a long pole. And then you can stomp the wasps if possible. There's often just the queen at that point when they're first starting out. So there's not a lot of risk of being stung multiple times. You could do this work at night to make it easier for you or help you avoid being stung. Indirect light is best, and what I mean by that is don't wear a headlamp on yourself and direct that at the nest. Use a light that's far away so that if you knock them down, they're attracted to the light and not you. You can use red filtered light to make you less easily detected. And then if you're doing this and are concerned about stinging, you can wear thick clothes so that a stinger wouldn't penetrate that. If you remove a nest and there are some workers, they may be left behind. They don't know what to do. They may be aggressive. These are the European paper wasps that I mentioned. And after the nest was removed, they hung around and hung around and hung around and weren't sure what to do. So in that case, one of the things you could do is vacuum them up. You can also vacuum nests that are in locations where you can get that vacuum without being stung. But in many cases, if there's a lot of individuals, you do want to leave that to a professional. In the case of vacuuming, if you suck up as many individuals as possible, you leave that outside exposed for a couple days, and most of those wasps will be dead from exposure. If it's a void that goes into your home or another void that is in an area where you don't want to have these insects sting you, then it's best to call a professional, because in that case, they may use different types of products to get into that void or may have to remove that nest. So you found an Asian giant hornet. Well, that's probably unlikely. They have been detected on the West Coast and in Canada. The numbers have been decreasing of detections over the last couple of years. If you found this big yellow and black organism, what you've probably found is the European hornet, which is very large. You could see its size compared to our other organisms here, the bald-faced hornet, our paper wasp, and honeybees. It's a big critter, but it's not as big as the European giant hornet. Again, if you find something that you're curious about for identification, send it off to one of those resources. All right, what is the world's deadliest animal? In the essence of time, I'll tell you that it's the mosquito. We may hear all these terrifying news stories about shark attacks and crocodiles, but when it comes down to it, mosquitoes kill more people per year than any other animal on Earth. And of course, a lot of this occurs in other parts of the world where there's different mosquito species transmitting different pathogens. So I'm going to kind of breeze through some of these true or false questions in the essence of time. Mosquitoes are active only at night, true or false? Unfortunately, that is false. Some mosquitoes, like the Asian tiger mosquito, are active during the day. And if you are not aware of this mosquito, it has been detected in New York, especially the southeastern part of the state. All the red arrows there are indicative of captures of this particular organism. You see one up here in Woodstock as well. This is a day-biting mosquito that is kind of voracious. It will follow you in a group of mosquitoes and try and suck your blood. You can learn more about this mosquito from Dr. Laura Harrington's lab at Cornell University. When we think of mosquitoes, people think of just getting a mosquito spray and that's going to solve their problems. But the reality is that because of their development, we have opportunities to eliminate their breeding sites and prevent their adult populations from emerging. So standing water that's present in gutters, containers, tree holes, etc., all breed mosquitoes. You could see these curlicues here are all the larval mosquito forms. And then we have our adult mosquito emerging from a pupa. So these types of situations, we want to clear the gutters so that the water flows freely, doesn't stand, and provide that ideal environment for mosquito breeding. And it's really as easy as this. So here's a container that was left out. It's full of water, full of mosquito larvae. They're really happy in this environment with the leaf material that is providing nourishment for them. We don't have to do any pesticide treatments. We don't have to use any products. We just need to dump the bucket and prevent any water from accumulating that would provide breeding for them. Some of the mosquito species can breed in a container the size of a bottle cap. So in the spring, walk around your yard, look for any containers that collect water, and take steps to prevent the accumulation of water. Again, I'll breeze through some of these true-false questions. Lyme disease is from only one tick species. That is actually true. The black-legged tick is the only tick species that will transmit Lyme disease. It will also transmit its own slew of pathogens. Each of these tick species is found here in the Northeast, as well as several others, but these are the ones that we are extremely concerned about in terms of their ability to acquire and transmit pathogens to people. And the list of pathogens and issues seems to always increase in a terrifying sort of way. Ticks are found only in the tall grass. Unfortunately, this is false. Different tick species can be found in different parts of the environment. Some can be found in all three. So the Lone Star tick, for example, does just fine in the woods, in the edge, and in the turf. The American dog tick prefers these sort of turf edge areas, and the black-legged tick really likes the woods. So no matter where you go, you could be encountering ticks. Fortunately, you can protect yourself from ticks. So some of the things that we recommend are permethrin treatments to clothing and gear to kill ticks. You can purchase a product like you see me doing here that you can apply to your own clothing. This will last for about 7 washes. Or you can either purchase professionally treated clothing or send your clothing out to be professionally treated, which will last about 70 washes. So an order of magnitude more protection from those professional treatments. If ticks get a lethal dose as they're crawling along your boots, your socks, your pants, then they will die and they won't attach. You can also use repellents to help you avoid ticks. The repellents that we have do not harm the ticks in any way. It just prevents them or reduces their ability for them to find you. Not all products are equally effective. So you may see a range of products on the shelf, but the ones that contain DEET, picaridin, IR3535, and oil of lemon eucalyptus are going to be the ones that protect against ticks and mosquitoes, especially if you have a concentration of 20 to 30% DEET or 20% picaridin. That's going to provide 4 to 5 hours of protection. If you've been exposed to ticks or you know you're going into a tick area, you can either isolate your clothing until you can treat it to kill any ticks that were on there. You can do this in a large plastic bag, or you could throw clothing and gear directly into the dryer on hot for 20 minutes. That's going to kill all arthropods that are on the clothing, and then you simply wash as directed. You have 24 to 48 hours to remove a tick. I wish this one were true. That's what we were taught when I was growing up. Unfortunately, with the new and expanding pathogens that ticks are carrying, one of them is Powassan virus, which the black-legged tick can transmit in about 15 minutes. So you really want to do regular tick checks to avoid these encounters with ticks, especially those protected areas where ticks prefer to hang out and attach: your groin, your belly button, armpits, base of hairline, behind the ears, and behind the knees. Best way to remove a tick. Well, here's one that has a lot of misinformation. Don't burn them, don't suffocate them, don't squeeze them, and don't twist them. The best way and the safest way to remove ticks is to use a pointy pair of tweezers, grab as close to the head as possible, and pull upwards with a slow and steady motion. And it may look traumatic. It doesn't hurt, but this is the way to do it so that you're not squeezing the body and not squeezing pathogens into you. So we have a bunch of resources on ticks. I'll share those in the chat as well. And the last thing I wanted to mention, we're already over time, but I did want to mention our First Friday events. These take place on the first Friday of each month. You can find more information by typing go.nysipm.org/WBY. And this month, which is occurring on Friday, we'll be talking about carpenter ants and carpenter bees. These are 30-minute sessions, jam-packed with practical information. So thank you for your time. I know that was a lot to cover in an hour.